Hi, this is Cameron,
And this is Santiago.
and welcome to our screencast on head-to-head movement from Chapter 10. Consider this Irish sentence. The English gloss is eat, I cheese, which means that we have verb, subject, object sentence order. As we know from X-bar theory, verbs must be adjacent to their complements. In this sentence, the verb eat is not adjacent to the object cheese, because the subject intervenes between them. This means that it violates X-bar theory.
Let's now consider this French sentence, Je bois souvent du thé. As we can see here, we have the English gloss, drink, which is a verb, and the tea, which is the complement. Our X-bar theory says that the verb needs to be adjacent to its complement. But in this sentence, we can't see that happening because we have here an adverb that is intervening between the verb and its complement.
So as we've seen, according to our current X-bar theory rules, Irish and French both have some sentence patterns that deviate from what we would expect. Irish has a verb, subject, object sentence order, and French can have an adverb intervene between the verb and its complement, the object. So in order to overcome these, we're going to need to add a new set of rules, which are called transformations. Transformations are rules that move or insert some elements in the sentence, and we will explore those next. This image attempts to capture how language is produced in the mind. First, we have the lexicon. Words from the lexicon are fed into the X-bar rules, which generate a basic sentence. But before we get to the D structure, or deep structure, the sentence has to pass through a series of filters. These filters include things like the theta criterion, the rule of inserting it if there's no subject, and binding conditions, and also EPP. After passing through these filters, the D structure has been produced. The D structure, however, needs one more layer of rules to get to proper sentence order in any language. These are the transformation rules. After it passes through transformation rules, the S structure, or surface structure, is produced. The S structure can account for any kind of sentence order, including VSO like in Irish.
To understand our transformation rules, let's start with the first rule, which is verb movement. Let's consider again our French sentence, Je souvent bois du thé. If we suppose that the French sentence starts out just like this in this tree, we have our underlying representation or deep structure. However, we saw before that French sentences don't follow the order shown in this tree. Therefore, we need a transformation rule to get to our surface structure. Verb movement applies here because we need to move this verb to T position so that we can have our surface structure. If we do that, then we will have a correct order for French. Therefore, when we move the verb from B to T, we leave a T or a trace that represents the movement. And now we have moved the verb to T, we have our surface structure. And now the order is correct, and therefore the sentence is grammatical.
So let's consider the difference between French and English here. In French, we have subject, verb, adverb, object. In English, we have subject, adverb, verb, and object. So we can see that the verb in French has moved from this position to in front of the adverb. So in French, we have main verb, V to T movement. In English, however, the main verb does not undergo this movement, which is why we see the difference in sentence structure between French and English. Examining the sentence orders of these sentences is one test you can do to determine if a language has V to T movement. In French, we see subject, verb, adverb, object. This is evidence that there is V to T movement. In English, we see subject, adverb, verb, object. having the adverb appear before the verb is evidence that there is not V to T movement. An additional test that you can perform to see if a language has V to T movement or not is to look at a sentence that has a negative particle in it. So in the French, we have subject, verb, negative, object. In English, we have subject, negative, verb, and object. You'll notice that we also have inserted do here, which is an auxiliary, and we will get to this in a future slide. For now, just ignore it. So the French shows that the verb is coming before the negative particle. When we have this SV negative O sentence order, this is evidence that there is V to T movement. When we have the verb coming after the negative particle, so subject, negative, verb, object, this is evidence that there is not V to T movement in a language. Now let's consider these two sentences. The sentence order shows us subject, auxiliary, adverb, verb, object. In the English sentence, we have the same sentence order. Subject, auxiliary, adverb, verb, and object. This might strike you as a bit strange since before we claimed that English does not have V to T movement, whereas French does. Because auxiliary verbs and verbs appear together in syntax trees, we can tell that the auxiliary has actually moved up in the sentence. So it appears that when there are auxiliaries, English does have V to T movement. And we'll explain why later. The way that we explain this difference between French and English, that French has V to T movement for all tensed verbs, and English has V to T movement for auxiliaries only, is called parameters. Basically, this means that these rules apply differently across languages.
The next transformation rule is called T to C movement, or subject auxiliary inversion. This transformation is necessary because English does not indicate question complementizers with an overt complementizer or particle in this area. Therefore, C is empty and needs to be filled with something. That's why auxiliary from T needs to move from T to C so that the question order can be correct. We can understand T to C movement because it is supported by the fact that subject auxiliary inversion is in complementary distribution with overt question complementizers in English. For example, in this first sentence we have I asked, have you seen the cat? So we have the auxiliary here in the C position. In the second sentence, we have an overt question complementizer in the C position. I asked whether you have seen the cat, so the auxiliary can't be in the C position. In the third sentence, we have an incorrect sentence, or an ungrammatical sentence, because we see that the question complementizer and the auxiliary are in the C position, but that does not happen. So that's why we know that subject auxiliary inversion and overt question complementizers are in complementary distribution, and this supports T to C movement.
Because we need to raise the word in T to the C position in order to form questions in English, we have a problem. What do we do when we have a sentence that only has a main verb? We already know that English doesn't have V to T movement for sentences with only a main verb. So in this sentence, you speak Italian. Speak is still in the V position, thus it cannot undergo T to C movement. So there is only one solution for this, and it is do support. In order to form a question in English for a sentence that does not already have an auxiliary, we will need to insert do so that it can go from the T to the C position. So now we have, do you speak Italian? This gives us the correct sentence structure for a yes-no question in English. The do is a dummy It doesn't really have any meaning. It is just here as a syntactic support. Let's go back to our original sentences that showed us what issues we have with our current X-bar theory rules. We have an Irish sentence, eat I cheese, and the French sentence, I drink often tea. Using V to T movement, we showed how this French sentence can work. However, V to T movement does not explain Irish. We still need another kind of movement rule to explain this sentence. Let's consider our Irish sentence, eat I cheese, which has the verb, subject, object sentence order. If we treat it as we have so far, we'll see that our subject comes here, our verb comes in the verb phrase where we would expect it, and the object comes at the end. So we have an SVO sentence structure. This is ungrammatical in Irish. We can see that V to T movement is not the solution to our question. If we move V to T, we can see that we still have SVO sentence order. So there must be something else going on to derive the correct sentence order. The solution that syntacticians provide us is that perhaps the subject itself does not appear under the TP, but actually within the verb phrase. Let's take a moment to redraw this tree. So the verb phrase internal subject hypothesis states that the subject actually is generated in the verb phrase as the determiner of the verb phrase. So it would appear here in the sentence. This gives us the correct sentence order in Irish. We have verb, subject, object. This solves our conundrum over Irish sentences. You may be wondering, what does this mean for languages like English, in which the subject precedes the word in the T position? Well, it turns out that in most languages, the subject that is created within the verb phrase actually moves to the position we expect it to be in, which is the specifier of the TP. In Irish, it does not move, which is how we are able to generate the VSO sentence order. But in languages like English, French, and really most languages, the DP that's generated within the VP will move, which gives us the correct sentence order of I have eaten cheese.
Okay, everybody, we hope that this screencast was useful, and thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Bye.